I the jerk for leaving a theater play 2 days before the premiere? I, a 23-year-old man, was invited to play the narrator for the Rocky Horror Show around 2 months ago. It was not very complicated because the narrator only interacts with the other characters around 2 or 3 times throughout the show. I accepted the invitation and started going to the rehearsals, even though I was taking a break from musical theater and live about 2 or 2.5 hours away from the city. When I started attending, everything was fine. Even though I am not an extroverted person, I did not have much trouble. I learned my lines and was really enjoying the character and all the jokes it has and how it interacts with the public. The play was really funny, and I really enjoyed watching the other actors perform their parts. Everything was going well until the last rehearsal. The first issue, although petty, still kind of hurt. When we were rehearsing the curtain call, my character was sent to the back line. I am the only speaking character there, which felt weird considering that the narrator appears throughout the show and interacts a lot with the public. But I could live with it. The second and more important issue was that 1 week before the premiere, I was informed that there would be another narrator who had never attended the rehearsals. I was going to perform only in the early morning shows. Here, that usually means the play where the least amount of people go. It is more like a friends and family kind of play, especially since this is not a paid gig but more for the love of it. It was strange that they told me this crucial information just 1 week before. A lot of people who were going to see me could not attend the morning shows. When I informed them about the change, they told me they could no longer go, which felt terrible. I tried to discuss this with the organizers and explain my reasons for leaving, hoping it could be fixed. Instead, I was greeted with passive-aggressive comments, which was somewhat understandable. It felt awful that after 2 months of attending rehearsals, while managing a lot of college work, I was still dedicating a lot of time to the project only to be replaced at the last minute. I would have accepted and been cool with it if the performances had been better distributed, but that was not the case. Now, I do not have a role and feel terrible for leaving the play like that. My friends and family are telling me that I did the right thing, and that I need to have some respect for myself, as what they did was really a rude thing to do at the very last moment. However, I still feel really guilty, even though it does not change things much for them as they can just put the other actor in all the performances. Am I the asshole? You haven't done anything wrong. How they went about sidelining you was an awful thing to do. The director should have addressed any performance issues with you up front instead of blindsiding you with a substitute. Failure of communication and rampant dishonesty are enough justification for walking away. Screw them! Am I the jerk for removing my friend from my wedding? I met my best friend in college and we became fast friends. I ended up moving back home halfway through school, but we stayed connected. He and I never lived in the same area, but I made sure to always travel to see him. I had always been the single friend, so I was available for whatever and whenever. Fast forward about 10 years. He decided to move to where I am from. I was so excited to have him close. Around this same time, I decided to try online dating again. He made a comment about hoping I would not meet someone just in time for him to live near me. A few months after he moved here, I ended up meeting my now husband. Things moved very quickly for us since we were a bit older. My friend never seemed interested in getting to know my husband and appeared irritated that I was dating. About a year later, I got engaged. My friend had known I always wanted a destination wedding in Puerto Rico, and he knew I wanted him in my wedding. Once I got engaged, he seemed to avoid me. I purchased a gift to ask him to be my bridesman, but he continuously canceled on me. He said he wanted to throw me an engagement celebration, but conveniently canceled repeatedly. I finally met up with him a few weeks later, gave him his gift, and he agreed to be in the wedding and apologized for being distant. We had a short engagement of 6 months to the wedding. Our wedding party and guests only had to pay for their plane tickets. My parents covered everything. I asked several times if he had bought his plane ticket, and he kept making excuses about financial reasons. Meanwhile, he was taking other vacations with other friends. He left me on read several times when I texted about wedding outfits and travel arrangements. I finally had to give him a deadline as my wedding planner needed a final count. His deadline came and went with no response from him. I let him know that unfortunately, we had to move on assuming he was not coming. We had a conversation that ended with him calling me a terrible friend and not giving him enough time, insisting that he obviously was going to be there. We are no longer friends, and I am blocked on all social media. I still love him and miss him deeply. I never wanted it to come to this, but I had to put myself first in this friendship for once. So, am I the asshole? Nothing you have done here makes me think you are the jerk. The man clearly had feelings for you and was upset about you getting married. He should have worked through his own feelings and been more upfront and honest. It sucks for him, but he lost his chance. Just know that you may not be able to repair your friendship. It happens. That's just how life is. Am I the jerk for calling out my sister-in-law's disrespectful behavior? Am I the jerk? My husband and I have been together for nearly a decade, and he is extremely close to his family. He pretty much holds them at a higher level than me, his wife. His sister has always been a problem, and no one cares to put her in her place. She is in her 30s and extremely immature due to the company she keeps. When we got married a few years ago, I chose to include her as a bridesmaid because I wanted to have a bond with her, and what a show that was. The entire time we were getting ready, she was in and out of the room with her then boyfriend, making jokes and just goofing off. When it was time to take pictures, she opted out because her corset was too tight and she was going to pass out. My other bridesmaid and I were more than willing to shoo her away because we were over it. A few years later, my husband and I were expecting a baby. When we announced it, my sister-in-law snatched the ultrasound photo, took a picture of it, and sent it to her now boyfriend, saying, "Lol, I have a surprise." I was livid because she is too grown to act like this. She was making it about her, and my husband did not say anything to her. He just chuckled and kept on with the day. It was time for my maternity pictures, and I asked her to please not post anything on her social media. She does part-time photography and snapped our photos. She agreed, and my husband reiterated that to her. I then came to find out she posted them on Pinterest without letting us know. Again, my husband did not say anything to her. I gave birth and again told everyone on both sides of the family to please not post my child on social media, as I like to keep my family private. She went behind my back and made a close friends tab on Instagram and has been posting pictures there. I only found out because a family member of his sent me a screenshot innocently. I told my husband and all he had to say was, "Well, you're blowing this out of proportion." Finally, when his family came over to our home after I gave birth, his sister proceeded to tell me, "If you were put together, I would have taken pictures of you." I just had a baby, and being put together was the last thing on my mind while I was recovering. After a lot of back and forth, I decided to call her out on her behavior, and now his family is ignoring me and looking at me like I am at fault. Again, I ask, am I the jerk? You did nothing improper, but it's surprising to marry someone who always puts his family first and sees them as perfect. It's clear your sister-in-law was never taught respect or boundaries, and no one enforces them. Couples therapy might help so you and your husband can become a team because he still thinks he's on a team with his family. Do not let him brush this under the rug and seriously question why he never takes your side and dismisses your needs. Am I the jerk for questioning my mom's finances after she took money from my bedroom and deposited into her account to contribute towards college finances? I am about to go into my second year of university. I have always offered to help out when it comes to college expenses. The first year was easy, as we had financial assistance, and my mother was working while I received a student grant. However, things changed this year when my mother retired from work due to an injury, and money became tighter. I had left €2,000 worth of notes in my bedroom cabinet, hidden away that I had earned. My mother found this money and put it into her bank account to keep it safe. I was slightly thrown off, and I asked her to take it out several times, which she agreed to do. However, she never did. I caved and told her to keep it towards my accommodation deposit for the subsequent year, which she agreed to. About 3 months later, the time to pay fees comes around. My mother told me she wanted to help as much as possible beforehand. Excluding that €2,000, I have paid the first month's rent and the deposit out of my money recently. My mother asked me to help out financially further with the rent, and I told her I was happy to, but that my account did have a dent at the moment because of this. She then listed my work, my student grant, and subsidized how much I should give her towards expenses. I was confused by the months being added up, as the money she had from me should cover a majority of it. I told her to use the €2,000 she took to use towards these expenses, and if that runs out, I'll help further. I also mentioned that I had the deposit and first month of my rent covered. After some slight bickering, it turns out, my mother doesn't have a lot of money in her account, so I would have to pay more money in the near future on top of the money she took from me. I was understanding at first and asked if she was financially struggling, which she said no to, but she quickly became erratic with me, almost as if I was being unfair for questioning why I should give so much. I'm mostly annoyed because it was my money that I would rather have control of. We have family who offered to help put me through college on top of my assistance, but she said no out of pride. I am absolutely wanting to help, but it feels wrong that the money isn't in my account. I feel like I've been scammed out of money that I could have paid rent with myself. Am I the asshole? You acted correctly. It's pretty clear that she stole from you and didn't even bother to discuss it beforehand. It's messed up that she took the money, lied about it, and now expects more from you. Definitely consider keeping your savings in a secure bank account to avoid this happening again. Am I the jerk for going to my surgery alone? I, a 23-year-old female, had a fall 2 weeks ago, broke my foot, and found out I need surgery for it. My mother, a 45-year-old female, has been planning a big anniversary party, and I have been helping her. Sometimes she asks me to come along on errands for the party even though I'm supposed to be resting at home. She's mindful of it, however, and will park closer to the buildings and look for places for me to sit if I get tired of being on crutches, so it's not too bad. But for sure, I'd rather be at home. She also decided she wanted to lose weight for the party and has been dieting. Recently, she got prescribed Ozempic. I'm very mindful of my weight and what I eat, so she comes to me for advice. I was scared of the Ozempic and let her know. It was on back order, so she started calling different pharmacies to see who had it in stock. I sat with her while she was on the phone, and she finally found a pharmacy that had it in stock. The pharmacist told her he'd call her back when she could pick it up. I was happy for her but feeling pretty tired, so I decided to lay down to take a nap. I fell asleep, and she came into my room screaming and hyperventilating. I asked what was wrong. She told me the Ozempic was ready for pickup, so when I found out it wasn't an emergency, I turned over to go back to bed. She asked if I wanted to go with her and I said no. She came in a few minutes later, squealing about how excited she was. She came to my bed to hug, squeeze, and kiss me. It was fine at first, but then I was getting annoyed because she got really aggressive with the affection. I told her to stop, but she wasn't listening. After a while, I started to get upset and raised my voice at her. She said she'd stop if I gave her a kiss and I told her I didn't want to. She was insistent on it, but by that point, I was beyond pissed. I told her to leave me alone and her tone changed. She walked out of my room and came back in to tell me, "Don't forget that you need me, I don't need you." While she was out, the doctor called and told me surgery was scheduled 2 days from then. I called my mom to tell her and she said, "Good for you," and hung up. The next day I woke up to messages from her asking for help with a vendor. I went to her room and she was rude to me and brushed me off. The day after that, I received a text from her sister asking for surgery information, such as the location and time. So my mom told her sister about it and is trying to extract information from me through her. Today, one day before surgery, my mom texted me and asked what hospital the surgery was at. I texted back saying, "No need to worry about it." All she said was, "You are so immature. I plan on going to the surgery alone and leaving the planning and weight loss to my mom. You are not at fault here, but you may need to make arrangements for who will pick you up from surgery. They may not allow you to go home with an Uber. It sucks that you can't count on your mother for support, especially when she's being manipulative and high maintenance. Seriously though, make sure to check with the hospital to see if they require a driver and someone to stay on site during the procedure. If not, the surgery might get canceled." Am I the jerk for not trying to mediate the awful relationship between my wife and my parents? Hello everyone, I am a 26-year-old man married to a 25-year-old Russian woman, and we have a 5-month-old son. 4 years ago, I moved to Moscow to be with my wife, who has a small family consisting of her mother and 12-year-old sister. They are not close with other relatives and lost their father 5 years ago. My wife's relationship with my parents has always been difficult, especially during her pregnancy, due to lack of communication and attention. My parents would sporadically text but lacked depth. They showed little interest in her pregnancy during video calls, making her feel neglected. Despite this, they send money and care packages with European foods and financial contributions for our apartment. Cultural and mindset differences between Russia and the West have made it difficult for my parents to adapt. They insist that I remain true to my European roots. However, they struggle to articulate what specific values they are referring to, simply stating that Europeans and Russians think and act differently. I remind them that I am currently in Russia and must adjust accordingly to fit in at work and in daily life. After our son's birth, my parents wanted to visit us in Moscow, but my wife felt she wasn't quite ready because she was exhausted nursing. We decided to breastfeed instead of using formula, and she would rather have my parents over when she was more recovered and used to having a baby around at home. Despite her hesitation, my parents eventually visited when our son was around 2 months old. There was some reluctance on my wife's part, though. I suppose my parents had great hopes because they had to pay a large sum of money to get to Russia. My parents were invited to my wife's mother's home. A huge variety of dishes were prepared to welcome them. While my wife mostly held our child during the meal, my parents felt left out and upset as they were not offered the opportunity to bond with their grandchild. Despite this, they did not take the initiative to ask to hold him themselves. A few days later, my wife took our son to get vaccinated. When she returned, she was instructed not to receive visitors for 1 day or take our child outside for a walk. This meant my parents couldn't visit, which angered them. They accused my wife of preventing them from seeing their grandchild, leading to a rift between them. I couldn't mediate as both parties were livid. Upon asking my Russian friends and colleagues, I learned that it's common in Russia to avoid visitors for 1 day after a child's vaccination due to the increased risk of getting infected easily, especially in a huge city like Moscow. To this day, my wife and parents still cannot communicate properly. My parents send weekly texts to my wife asking about our son, but she responds slowly and never texts them first. My wife would occasionally, in the middle of an argument or disagreement between us, make a contemptuous reference to my parents and our European values. Your behavior wasn't right. It is your job to run interference with your family for your wife and not let her take the brunt of their anger. Stand up for your family, which is your wife and child, and make sure your parents know in no uncertain terms that you have your wife's back. Everything you've said points to your parents being the issue, not her. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.